Another bait I want to talk about a little bit is a chatterbait. I see a lot of the previous speakers have talked about a spinnerbait, which is a vibrating bait with blades. This one also too is a vibrating bait, skirted as well with a trailer, but has one single blade that's actually inverted. It actually pushes water, allows the bait to actually swim like a crankbait. See this vibrating bait, when you reel it, you can see the action that it has just on a straight retrieve. Has that real side-to-side motion. You can feel that vibration all the way through your tip. So it's a really, really easy bait to fish. Just cast and reel even like you would a spinner bait. But the cool thing with this is I can control the depth a little bit easier. I can slow it down, I can pause it, I can reel it, stop it, or I can fish it very fast and aggressively. This bait originally was designed to fish around grass. It works very, very effectively around grass because it has that bill that actually acts as a weed guard to protect the single hook that's on that. It actually acts as a weed guard. See, it has great action on there. This is they make them in different sizes. This chatterbait's actually 3/8 ounce. And they make them from 1/4 ounce, 3/8, ½ ounce, and even up to 1 ounce, depending upon the depth that you fish. I really like throwing a 3/8 to maybe half. I can, there again, I'm fishing this through grass. I don't want it really to bury into the grass. I want to fish it just above and through the grass. That trailer I'm throwing on there, and you can throw a lot of different trailers. I've thrown swim baits on there, like Reactionation Skinny Dippers. This one happens to be a Strike King Bannick shad. It's a really cool bait. It's kind of like a fluke. It's got a little fork tail, but it's got joints in it. It's got 3 different segments in this bait to make it really flexible, so it really kicks with that blade vibrating. So you get a lot of good action. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll rip that chatterbait that kind of looks like that jerkbait that I just threw. You can really see how that can get those fish really fired up. With this technique, it's really particular what I use with this. All my other rods I fish straight braid with fluorocarbon leader. This one, I really prefer using straight fluorocarbon. I feel it's really important with this bait. It allows it to give it a little bit more stretch. I allow the rod to load up with having fluorocarbon versus braid that has no stretch, that responds too quickly. When I'm fishing this chatterbait, when that fish eats it, a lot of times, you'd be surprised, you don't get those really aggressive strikes like you think. The rod will just kind of load up. The fish comes behind the bait and grabs a hold of it. By having straight fluorocarbon will allow the bait to allow it to have a little bit more stretch. I have a composite rod. This is actually an e-glass rod. This is from Daiwa. This is a Tatula series reaction bait rod, 7.2 in length, and it's a composite, so it's got half graphite, half fiberglass. By doing that, it loads up. You can see I have a lot more bend in that rod, a lot more give. I use 20-pound FC Sniper fluorocarbon. I want to use heavier line. There again, it's a single hook, like a spinnerbait, so I want to make sure I have enough power to drive the hook through the fish. But I can fish this to really heavy cover. The fish are not really keyed in on the line size, so I like to throw as heavy as I can get away with. So I'll tend to use straight 20-pound tests. Again, Sunline FC Sniper fluorocarbon. When I'm fishing this bait, I also like using the same type of reel. This is actually, this one here is a Zillion. It's a T-wing system, just like on the Tatula I was using. Same gear ratio, 6:3 to 1. Again, I don't want to overfish this bait. I'm not burning it through the water. I'm actually slow to medium retrieve. And I like to control the speed of this bait with the retrieve of my reel, so that 6:3 to 1 allows me to do that a lot better. Okay, I can let that bait settle to the bottom, and I can wind that thing through. See how erratic that is? Just reeling the handle. I'm not even twitching the rod. Bait's very, very erratic, as you can see. Color obviously ranges. This happens to be a white and chartreuse bait, which is really commonly used. Obviously, I'll use, there's times I'll use black and blue if I'm fishing dirty water, green pumpkin if I'm trying to resemble a bluegill, or real transparent clear baits if I'm fishing really clear water. So again, this chatterbait's really popular out on the circuit. It's really designed to fish around grass, but can be fished around wood. Really easy to bait to fish. Again, it's really important on this bait to use a composite rod. Again, this is a Tatula E-Glass series rod. It's half graphite, half glass. It has a lot more bend. It allows, when the fish eats the bait, the rod will slowly load up, as you can see. So a lot of times I'm not detecting the bites right away, which is okay because it allows the fish to get it in their mouth. When the rod loads, I'll just sweep into those fish, pull into them, and just keep straight retrieve. You want to keep pressure on that fish, whether it's going to jump. A lot of times people put the rod tip down and stop as the fish jumps. I want to continuously keep cranking on that fish, get them to the boat. With 20-pound test fluorocarbon, a lot of times I don't even wait for the net. I'll just swing that fish into the boat. So it's really important on this chatterbait to keep that rod loaded, keep the pressure on them, and don't stop reeling. And a lot of times I'll either lip the fish or swing them in the boat. So really popular bait. Again, this is a chatterbait, 3/8 ounce in size, white chartreuse. The blade on there, and you have different colors. This happens to be a straight silver blade. There's times on overcast days where I actually don't want the flash. I'll want a black blade. There's times there's some, like in dirty water, I'll want a gold blade. There again, just like a spinnerbait, you can change up your blade combination. So real popular bait, skirted again. It's got a single hook. It's either a 3 to 5 odd hook, depending upon the size of the chatterbait that you throw. Again, this is a Bannick minnow by Strike King. You can throw a wide variety of trailers on there. Really get creative with the trailers that you use on these chatterbaits and experiment with them. So definitely advise you to do that. Again, after the seminar, I'll let you guys actually feel the rod and reel combinations. You can kind of see what I'm feeling with the action of the rod when I'm done. So again, that was a chatterbait. Another really popular bait in the springtime as the water temperature is warm in the spring, you're going to get a lot more growth out there. A lot of grass and vegetation start growing from the bottom up. That's when I really like fishing that chatterbait. So I'm going to switch over to a topwater bait. Something that really helped me, was key for me last year fishing the FLW trail, and that's a river to sea Whopper Plopper. Really, really interesting bait. It's a topwater bait that's shaped in the size of a walking bait like a super spook, but it has a tail that's actually attached to a wire on the back of that spins freely on the back of that. The tail's actually a kind of a hard rubber, so it's really solid. It's not going to break on you at all. The bait has rattles in it, so it does make some additional noise. Okay. With this Whopper Plopper, it's like a buzz bait. It floats. You can pitch it out there, let it settle. See, a lot of things with the buzz bait, you can't do that with that. With a buzz bait, you got to cast and retrieve right away to keep that bait above the surface of the water. As I reel this bait, you can see how much water that throws. See the bubble trail that it makes? Look at that fish stalking that Whopper Plopper. One thing I can tell you with this Whopper Plopper, the noise, the gurgle, the chirp that it makes in the water is what really makes this bait so good. It really will actually aggravate those fish a lot of times when they're actually not wanting to bite a standard traditional topwater. Most of the time on this, a lot of people ask me, Joe, how do you retrieve this bait? Pretty simple. I mean, I usually do a medium retrieve when I'm fishing it. I'll get creative. I can stop it, let that fish get closer to it, and I can let it go again, stop it, which you cannot do with a traditional bladed surface bait like that. So really, really key. Now, on the setup that I use for this, I like using straight braid, okay? Because it's a floating type bait, I want my line to float, and that's what the braid does. Braid does float, does not sink like fluorocarbon. I want to use heavier line because the fish there, again, is not keyed in on the line. This is 50-pound Sunline FX braid, okay? So it's heavier braid, no stretch. And on this bait here, since I'm doing a straight retrieve, I have direct contact with that bait. I don't necessarily set the hook. I'll reel into the fish. When the fish hitting the bait with no stretch with that braid, and this has treble hooks, this comes with about number size 2 treble hooks on the bottom. There again, so I don't need a lot of power when I'm setting the hook, so I don't like to. I'll actually reel into the fish and keep that steady pressure on there, let the rod load. This is actually a Daiwa Tatula frog rod. It's 7'4" in length. This does have a lot more backbone, and the reason why I want a rod with this bait a little bit more backbone because of the weight of the lure. If I use too light of a rod casting this bait, it's going to load the rod up too much. So it'll allow me to control my cast. A lot of times when I'm fishing places like the California Delta, which we'll be fishing again this year in the FLW trail, is I'm making short, accurate casts. Having a little bit stiffer rod will allow me to control that heavier bait a lot better. Okay, the rod won't slap, the bait won't slap the bait when I'm casting on a lighter rod. So really cool bait. I don't know if you guys can hear that at all in the audience, how that makes that chirping sound, but the bubble trail it makes, the rattles in the bait, and the amount of water that it churns up just like a prop on an outboard motor really, really creates a lot of strikes on this bait. Some of the strikes I've gotten in this have been absolutely ferocious strikes too. I've had them in shallow water, come up behind it and wake on it and just absolutely crush this bait. So again, this is a River Sea Whopper Plopper. They make this in 3 different sizes. This happens to be the 130 size. They make a 120, and they also make a 190, which is a lot bigger size. But the 130 size is a great size. They have different colors. This happens to be the straight bone white. They do make it in a loon color, which is black with a yellow head. They make a lot of different other colors that match, like bluegill and brim. So in the springtime, I really like white. They get really aggressive. Like a lot of guys I know that throw a lot of white baits on beds and stuff. There again, the white creates a lot more strikes, gives them more of a target. In dirty water, I like throwing black a lot of times, you know, because with there they're more keen in on a silhouette. So really cool bait. I'm using I'm using a Tatula TWS system, and this is a 7:3-to-1 gear ratio reel. The reason why I like a little bit higher gear ratio reel, because if I want to speed this bait up, I can do that with the reel. Again, I'm not using the rod at all to work this bait. I'm using just the speed of the reel when I control it. So I can go faster with it, or I can slow it down. Okay, all with the control of the reel. Making long casts, I'm covering a lot of water. So if I make a long cast to a target and I fish it the first effective 5 feet, I want to reel that bait fast back to the boat, and I want to cast it back out there again to a different target. So that'll allow me to do that with a higher gear ratio reel. So again, I'm using straight 50-pound test braid. This is FX Sunline braid. 50-pound test, no stretch. Really, really cool bait to fish, and easy to fish. I mean, there's really not a lot of, other than just the retrieve with the handle. You can experiment with the speed of the reel. Really cool bait. Again, it's got loud rattles in it to create more noise, especially on windier days. That little extra rattle will actually allow the fish to target on where the bait is. So the same thing with dirty water. So again, river to sea Whopper Plopper, Tatula frog rod 7.4, kind of a medium heavy action rod. Look at that fish, you want some of that bait, huh? And I'm using straight 50-pound test or FX Sunline braid with a Tatula 7.3-to-1 100H reel.